the offending kids will be suspended. The woman listens quietly, and when the principal shows her the file listing all the perpetrators, she's stunned to see a familiar face, and she quickly asks what the hell Sean's photo is doing in the file. Let's turn our attention to the dead mansion, and check what's up with this unhinged organization. Inside, the director was on a call, receiving the rundown of what happened to Rachel's mission, and he sounded pissed. Back in her everyday undisguised look, Rachel could only apologize to her boss. She explained that she ordered Eugene to kill the old woman, but that plan did not pan out as it was supposed to. Rachel attributed the failure to the kid being a defective and useless product incapable of killing an old woman. He's a dud who can't even carry out an order properly. The director halted Rachel's angry rant, steering the conversation to what he really wanted to hear. He had already handed down the order to retrieve Eugene and leave the old woman alone. And yet she still went crazy and ordered the kid to eliminate the poor woman. From the director's perspective, Rachel is the one failing to carry out the mansion's orders properly. And you really don't want to disobey this man. She insisted that the only thing she failed at was retrieving Sean. However, the director placed great importance on promises regardless of who the promise was made to. That's just his principle. With a crazed look, the director preached that before God, there should only be faith and trust. Everything else aside from those is heresy. However, there are still good children who lack faith. He had no choice but to create the controlling measure called the 3 principles. So, Rachel must remember the consequences of uncontrolled and unexpected events from the past. Orders, principles, and promises. These are the absolute rules of Dead Mansion. Hearing the directors preaching over the phone, Rachel's faith was stoked. But she was still concerned about the retrieval of Sean. They can't give up so easily. The director has other plans for that in the near future, though. There are many ways to handle that matter without directly touching the old woman and making an enemy out of Sean. Mary, who posed as Eugene's sister, had already started the operation using her multiple smartphones. The very next day, Sean went to school as usual. He looked deathly tired and bored, and the lectures had not even started yet. He noticed that some of his classmates were looking at him differently. There were hints of fear and vigilance in their eyes. Walking to his seat, he casually asked his seatmate what was up and why everyone was acting so weird. Maybe people are just on edge for an exam he didn't know about. Seeing as his seatmate was tight-lipped, Sean got a little frustrated. The first ones to talk to him were the big bastards sitting in the last row of the class. They wanted to know if what they heard about Park Chyon was for real. It turned out that Mary had already propagated photos of Sean choking out Hyunho. It was a pretty blatant piece of evidence that he was a bully. He could quickly tell that this was a low-quality photoshopped image, but for untrained eyes, it probably looked real. When asked where they got the pictures, the big bastards at the back of the class seemed reluctant to spill. After a few seconds of thinking, the 3 big bastards lowered their heads to apologize, admitting that they were wrong all this time. There were rumors going around that Park Chyon beat up Joseph, taking the guy on as an underling. This ridiculous rumor had already spread all over the school. They were saying that Joseph was terrified of Chyon. There were even reports of him being friends with gangsters. They had all the pictures to back it up, and these photos were going too far. Word is that Chyon ordered Joseph to take care of that Hyunho kid in the first place. Hearing that last bit of rumor made his stomach turn. What are these people talking about now? He tried to vehemently deny any involvement with the tragedy that Hyunho went through, but no one believed his words. Just like that, his name was dragged through the mud in just a single night. No matter how badly he wanted to deny the allegations, no one would believe him. It also attracted the attention of the wrong crowd, like the big bastards in the back row. They were shoving and pushing people around Chyon, trying to suck up to the new big dog in town. The big bastard even threatened an innocent bystander to shut up or end up like Hyunho. Hearing those threats, Chyon stepped in to clamp the bastard's heavy hand. Chyon laughed, playing it off like he was trying to hide his involvement. He then invited the big bastard Sumjin outside to give them the real story of what actually happened. The other classmates were visibly fearful and disgusted by his words and demeanor. But this was the only way he could control the situation. Dead Mansion is really putting him through social torture. He let all the thugs out of the room with the same lackadaisical attitude he always had. As soon as they got far enough, the classroom erupted with muted discussions regarding Park Chyon's behavior. With the attack on his image underway, Chyon had to skip today's classes to dig for more information. He hung out with a bunch of thugs behind the school grounds. He found out that everybody received the photoshopped pictures in the group chat earlier this morning before school. The account just shared the photo, stirred the pot with a few words, and left. Of course, the highest names on the suspect list were those persistent Dead Mansion people. He still can't pinpoint their endgame with this plan, though. For now, he'll play along, acting like he just wanted to lead a quiet school life. But the cat's out of the bag now. He even mentioned transferring to another school again. His mood darkened as he told the big bastards that he wanted to graduate without trouble. He doesn't want to get caught up in pranks like this. He's way past the point of troubling himself with childish problems. He has his hands full with the world of adults. So he tasked the big body bastards to make sure that this matter didn't spread any further. Calling them his crew, keeping this quiet was their first job. Hearing Cheyenne order them around, calling them a crew, made these big boys blush like schoolgirls. While he was receiving their praise, a familiar figure just happened to pass by the dark alleyway. It was none other than Hyunho's mom. She just saw Cheyenne interacting with what looked like a bad crowd. This brings us back to the principal's office, where she was trying to deny that Cheyenne was involved in her son's case. She firmly believed that Cheyenne and Hyunho were friends, and there must have been some kind of misunderstanding along the way. But the principal had already gotten hold of the infamous photo circulating around the school. In addition, there's a testimony that he hung out with Joseph in the past. With all the available information planted recently, even the principal believed that Park Cheyenne was the original instigator of this mess. Hyunho's mother sat in that office, her mind reeling from disbelief. The principal added that contacting Cheyenne's parents was impossible. They seemed to think that the kid didn't receive a proper family education. As an educator, the principal knew far too many cases where a child such as Cheyenne could easily go astray. Humbly wiping his sweaty face, the principal urged the old lady to stop trusting the kid so much. Meanwhile, Cheyenne still wasn't seeing the bigger picture. He only hoped that the rumors would quiet down and eventually die out. Those buff bros have a surprisingly innocent side to them. They were so easily manipulated into becoming his underlings. Just as he was laughing to himself, Sean noticed something odd nearby. He stopped laughing and asked the figure hiding behind the alley if her name was Mary. She eventually showed herself with a wide smile. She thought she was hiding pretty well, so she wasn't expecting to get spotted so fast. As professional advice, Sean urged her to erase that strong coffee smell before going on a covert mission. This happened in front of Hyunho's house last time too. Mary was quite shocked to hear that the legendary Sean could even catch a whiff of someone's scent from so far away. It was almost creepy in a way. Sean took the opportunity to ask what her deal was and what she got from making his life more complicated than it already was. But she knew that this young man enjoyed the thrill of it all. She even caught the cool act he showed those buff bastards in the dark alley. Sean cringed a little, not expecting to be under such heavy surveillance. Mary wanted to ask how it feels to be slotted into the top bully position at school. Sean finally snapped. Being in such a negative spotlight wasn't his style at all. He was already popular to begin with. But she wasn't talking about all that. She wanted to know what he thought about the cold and harsh gazes of his peers, the eyes filled with betrayal and contempt underneath. Mary genuinely wanted to know if Sean liked that stuff. Used to such crazy characters from the mansion, Sean stayed chill and confirmed if she was behind all those photos. He admitted that it was well made for its purpose, but it was still a little crude for his tastes. She made a perfect weapon, just good enough to fool the general public. Mary admitted that, given the tight schedule and limited resources, she had to settle for something crude. All Sean was hearing were excuses. Slowly lifting his eyes with a mocking grin, he turned to Mary and said the word, "Scratch." The young lady's smile did not dissipate, but her hand darted into her bag with unprecedented speed. Sean immediately jumped out of the way. His bag suffered 3 gunshot wounds from the conveniently obscured gun inside Mary's purse. He found himself hiding behind concrete walls while trying to pacify Mary. This was Korea. They can't just take a gun out whenever they want. Besides, the mansion's supposed to retrieve him, not kill him. When asked what Mary would do if he was hit, she just laughed and argued that Sean could easily deal with this much firepower without any problems. But in her own opinion, the legend of Sean should just die. She thinks it would be better if they just discard him, not waste more resources for his retrieval. Walking into the dark alley away from the prying eyes of the public, Mary casually tossed her ruined purse away. She was now creeping in with a Glock in her hand. Sean erased his presence, letting the young lady walk deeper into the darkness to find him. Once he deemed the timing was right, Sean pounced at Mary, aiming to remove the gun from her hand. His grip strength was so absurd that the young lady could not make the firearm budge with 2 hands. He slammed Mary right into the nearby wall, hoping to shake her enough to let go of the Glock. But the girl was tough. She knew how to minimize impact damage. More importantly, she knew how to retaliate. Lifting her legs, Mary drew a hidden blade from under her skirt. It was just a tiny knife between her knuckles, but the experience she had wielding such a sneaky weapon made her deadly. Sean immediately protected his vital areas, but he was forced to take Mary's sudden attack. His eyes were as clear as they could be. While moving with zero wasted motion, he asked if this was all she had. Maybe Dead Mansion is really dead now if this is their best. Sean eventually got her in a chokehold, swiping the gun away. He pinned the young lady down on the cold, hard ground of the streets. Keeping her in place with one hand and balling his fist with the other, Mary must have never expected to go down so quickly. Instead of despair, she rolled over with a sly smile on her face. When it came to the matter of being defeated, Mary would like to beg to differ. That immediately became clear when a familiar voice made Sean snap out of his murderous daze. It was Hyunho's mom. She had just finished discussing Cheyenne with the principal, fighting for his name. Now, the young man was out in the street, towering over a young girl, seemingly raising his fist against her. Suddenly, the poor mother didn't know what to believe anymore. This polite young man was supposed to be her son's friend, so why was he behaving like a thug? Mary might be the one lying down on the floor, but she had the smile of someone very pleased with herself. Hyunho's mom finally asked Park Cheyenne if it really was him who hurt her son. Cheyenne immediately sobered up, realizing what his position might look like to those who didn't have the assassination context. Mary was not going to let him get another word of explanation in, though. The young lady played up her distress, getting up from the ground and crying while pleading for Hyunho's mother. Given that they were partly acquainted with one another, the mom asked what exactly was going on with Mary and Cheyenne. No matter how much he tried to discredit her words, he was unable to do so. When the mom yelled at him, calling his full name, Cheyenne was stunned. His obedience made it impossible to go against her words. When she ordered him to stay right where he was standing, he had no other choice but to follow. So, he did not dare move another inch. Balling his fist in frustration, he recalled the three principles. A parent's command was absolute. Mary then started pouring toxic ideas into the mom's ears. On that day, when she got Eugene back home, the kid's body was covered in bruises, and they wouldn't talk about the injuries. According to Mary, the kid kept insisting that brother Cheyenne had done it. Recalling that time when she caught Cheyenne wrestling with the kid as Cheyenne made an excuse that they were just doing some morning exercises, it wasn't hard for Hyunho's mom to connect the dots. There was also the principal's assessment and the testimony regarding Cheyenne's link with Joseph. Mary continued that she just wanted to ask Cheyenne about what really happened, only for the young man to lash out and hit her in the process. Cheyenne naturally denied these allegations as much as he could. The dubious Mary was laughing at him on the inside. They might not be allowed to touch Sean's new mother, but there are plenty of ways to get to him without the threat of violence. Sean tried his best to appeal to the mom. He asserted that Mary was a liar, and all it got him was a crisp slap on the face. Sean was speechless. His mom had just laid her hands on him. According to the principals, all Dead Mansion has to do is make the current parent give up on Sean herself. Right now, that's precisely what she was doing. As the upset old lady continued to express her disappointment and anger, Sean feared for her following words. Finally, she told him to never come back ever again. That was the final nail in the coffin. Everything went as Mary had planned. She was quite a genius. As she was about to get into the next phase of her plans, a familiar disguised face made itself known. Her stride was broad and powerful. She commanded an air of confidence and control. It was none other than Sister Rachel in her mommy disguise. It was time for her to swoop in and play the role of the disgruntled parent of a troublemaking child. Lifting her glasses, she sounded like an exhausted mother who couldn't handle the antics of a hopeless child. When she told Cheyenne that it was about time to go home now, the young man was visibly shaken. He did not want to return. Back in the Dead Mansion, the director flashed his disgusting grin, showing his bejeweled teeth. On the phone, he had just received updates regarding the success of Sean's retrieval. He praised Mary for such an excellent job. The perv was so excited at the prospect of his greatest weapon coming back that he lost all strength in his knees. He kneeled before a painting of the Lord and thanked the heavens for answering his prayers. The director attributed all the success to Mary and her twisted ideas. She made a truly befitting resolution as Dead Mansion's most excellent strategist. Acting modest despite all the praise, Mary insisted that she just did what the director wished for, and she would continue doing so. When the old perv started going on and on about how the legend of Dead Mansion was finally going home, that Sean was finally joining their ranks again, Mary's mood took a turn for the worse. Her next orders were to return as quickly as possible, and she accepted the task without a fuss. On the other side of the room were Sister Rachel and the parentless weapon, Sean. They were busy eating pizza, ice cream, spicy noodles, and all kinds of good food. Rachel commented on how similar their tastes were when it came to food, knowing full well that Sean was just eating whatever she ordered him to eat. On second look, this demonic nun was actually forcing him to eat pineapple pizza with a side of mint ice cream. This was worse than torture, if you ask me. This was Rachel's way of making sure that Sean severed his connection with that accidental parent. Just like before, she had complete control over the young man's actions. She was sure that Dead Mansion could finally regain ownership over their star. Meanwhile, Sean was practically begging for milk to counteract the heat lingering in his mouth. While busy with the torturous dinner, a man sitting in a wheelchair arrives to check on Rachel and her mission of capturing Sean. It turned out to be Joseph's psychopathic dad, Kwon Byung-woo. He was also the one backing up Dead Mansion by providing Sister Rachel's accommodations and resources. When asked, she replied that the most expensive penthouse in the area they were being housed in was passable. It was not too bad. Sean reckoned that the voice of that vegetable sounded familiar. The psycho wasn't bothered by all the nonsense. All he cared about was catching the damned brat that put him in the chair. He would gladly spend any amount of money to make it happen. Realizing who this psycho was, Sean snapped out of his spicy noodle drunkenness and stood up from his seat. He teased that the psycho must be trying out cosplay or something with all the bandages and the wheelchair. This naturally pissed off Joseph's father. This encounter could have escalated out of control if it had not been for Sister Rachel to step in with authority. Pulling out a mini Uzi from God knows where, she pointed its muzzle at the wheelchair-bound psycho. She asserted that, as discussed, Dead Mansion would take custody of Sean and no one else. In return, the organization would not touch Joseph. That was the condition of their deal. The psycho turned around and assured her that he was clear on the details. This was just business after all. Before heading out, the psycho added that Sean was not the only one he was seeking revenge on. Since this didn't concern her at all, Sister Rachel gave the psycho the green light to handle his revenge against other people as he wished. Sitting in front of Sean, Rachel teased that if the psycho guy went on to kill Hyunho's mom as revenge, the Dead Mansion wouldn't lift a finger to retaliate. Sure, the organization promised not to touch the old woman, but they never agreed to a protection mission either. Realizing that Hyunho's mom might be in grave danger without any sort of protection, something inside Sean was spurred on. He imagined what she must be doing right now. She would be diligently preparing all those delicious snacks to sell. A customer approached the stall and promptly ordered one of her famous rice cakes. The customer even added a few more fried snacks too. Just as Sean was thinking about her, she was also thinking about the kid. She saw a child eager to make her feel better in the toughest time of her life. The customer interrupted her thoughts by adding some delicious-looking kimbap to his order. She just could not shake the thoughts of that sweet young man away. Why would there be pictures of him seemingly messing with Hyunho? Believing all the shady information around, she tried to convince herself that the young man was just a bad child. He was a thug who put her son in the hospital. Distracted by everything going on inside her mind, the old lady accidentally cut her finger. She dropped the knife on the floor as the shock of being wounded made her curl in pain. Seeing this, the customer hurriedly entered the kitchen to see if she was okay, as he could see a lot of bleeding. The mother kept insisting that she was okay. With tears in her eyes, she assured the customer and herself that it would stop soon. Mr. Customer calmed down upon hearing that. Then, this bastard started pulling out a hidden knife from his pockets. Gripping the blade while keeping it obscured, the seemingly concerned customer slowly closed the remaining gap between him and the target. He remembered receiving the orders from the boss, so he would not have to worry about the cleanup after the job. All he had to do was sneak up to the old lady and go for the kill, and their partner company would handle everything after that. Just one hiccup though, Hyunho's mom just picked up a phone call. She must have just received massive news as her eyes darted open in shock upon hearing what the person on the other line said. Hyunho's mom hurriedly turned around and ran out of the shop. She didn't even see the man's knife. She just told the customer to eat as much as he wanted free of charge. When asked where she was going, she simply answered that she was heading for her son. It turned out that Hyunho had miraculously regained consciousness. That phone call was from the hospital, notifying his mom that the kid had awakened. Doctors and nurses hurriedly poured into the hospital room to assess Hyunho's condition. The kid seemed responsive, but it was still pretty hard for him to speak. The doctor advised that he take it easy and stop pushing too hard. When asked if he remembered anything before getting hurt, the young man stared at the ceiling and solemnly answered that he did. The last thing he remembered was yelling at his mom and feeling like the biggest asshole for it. He could remember her standing meekly and apologizing for doing something nice for her little boy. While he was unconscious, all he could think about was how wrong he was for treating his mom with so much disrespect. All he wanted to do was apologize to her. Then the waterworks finally came down. Experiencing all these overwhelming emotions, Hyunho seemingly regressed to a kid desperately looking for his mom. He missed her dearly, and he felt horrible about how their last interaction turned out. As if on cue, his mom barged into the room. She was still red and exhausted from running all the way to her son's hospital room. She made her way in between the doctors and nurses. She only had eyes for her son. The medical practitioners around the old lady eventually noticed that there was blood on her hands. Quite a lot of it, actually. Hyunho grabbed her bloody hand and apologized with as much sincerity as he could muster. He wasn't all there yet mentally, but he just wanted to tell his mom that he was wrong. He was so wrapped up in his own problems that he hurt his mom along the way. Hearing those words from a son you thought was never going to wake up overwhelmed the old lady with all kinds of emotions. Near the door, the assassin customer sent by the psycho was still tailing the poor old lady. He called his boss, telling him that the mom and son were in the same location. They could just simply handle the two together when the chance presented itself. But the boss ordered the operation to stop. The psycho smiled menacingly as he formulated a change of plans. Back in the penthouse, Sister Rachel was going sicko mode on the furniture around her. Nothing was spared from her rage. Her mouth was bleeding while she was holding her submachine gun. She was chanting curses as if she had been wronged by someone. That's because she had been. That psycho, Joseph's father, dared to kidnap Sean, breaking their agreement. The psycho had just thought of a much more exciting plan. He could personally handle Hyunho and his mother right in front of Sean's eyes. Going back a few days ago, we went to the White Tiger Job Center, where laborers are always for hire. Inside, Sister Rachel felt uneasy with her mission. Beside her was that kid, Eugene. Both were on pins and needles while sitting on the couch, waiting for any updates. They were greeted by a pretty office lady with a nice smile. In her hand were 3 cups of coffee for herself and the guests. Rachel criticized the lady for moving so slowly, asking if making her wait so long was worth it. The office lady laughed lightly and apologized for taking so long. She explained that the market and Byungwoo Construction's headquarters were in shambles due to the many things that had to tally after Rachel had made such a big mess. The lady offered Eugene a little cup of hot chocolate, reminding him to drink slowly. Surprised, the kid thanked her for offering. Sister Rachel looked unamused. They were shelling out quite a bit of cash, so a little trouble shouldn't be bothersome. This was a professional agreement after all. Hearing her mention professionalism, the office lady took a seat and agreed they should conduct themselves as professionals. But isn't it deeply unprofessional when one party makes a massive mess without considering the aftermath? That's what the office lady thought. Hearing the lady take a jab at her actions annoyed Sister Rachel. She was quite adept at disguising her words with pleasantries, though. Eugene just sat there in the middle of all the tension, thinking he should have just stayed at the house. Anyway, the office lady had already taken care of everything, and it was up to Rachel to look at the reports, even though she was being blatantly disrespected by coffee served in a paper cup. Byungwoo Constructions also said they didn't need any compensation for damages. The office lady was quite curious about that. Rachel answered that it was an equal exchange between 2 parties. That's how professionals get things done. Whatever mess Byungwoo Constructions made would have nothing to do with the dead mansion. But the office lady gravely advised Rachel to take a more careful approach from now on. Curious about the ominous tone, Rachel asked what that advice meant. The office lady asserted that professionals should deal with other professionals, not with reckless delinquents. This Byungwoo Constructions organization was a little too hard to trust. Against Rachel's judgment, maybe they were not worthy of being business partners. Back to the present, she was experiencing the fallout of not listening to the office lady's advice and distrust for the dubious Kwon Byungwoo. The chairs and tables of the penthouse suffered in the hands of the angry nun. When she brings out the guns, you know it's serious. It turned out that the psycho had Sean kidnapped and boarded in a moving truck. Kwon Byungwoo's lifeless eyes poked through the bandages, pleased with the sight of the young man he so badly wanted to punish. He was not expecting such an efficient killing machine to be so useless without the orders of a parent. He rolled up to the young man, petting Sean's hair. Now that he's under Dead Mansion's guidelines, Sean can't really do anything without their proper orders. The psycho was very fascinated by such a powerful degree of brainwashing. Looking at Sean's wild eyes, Kwon Byungwoo could feel his twisted desires flaring up. Turning his chair around, Byungwoo laughed like a kid as he suddenly thought of something interesting. He imagined getting into contact with the organization and purchasing Sean to be his property. From then on, he could just order Sean to kill the old woman from the snack shop. That would be a twisted scenario that only an unhinged mind could think of. Laughing like a maniac, the psycho was quite pleased with how interesting that idea would be to see. He toned down the teasing a little bit. He urged the young man to chill out a little, as they hadn't even gotten started yet. Soon enough, he would tear that old woman and her injured son into pieces right in front of Sean's helpless eyes. Because of the state-of-the-art brainwashing programming he went through, the young man wouldn't be able to do anything but watch as it unfolds. He can't do anything without orders after all. All he had to do was sit still, gagged and bound while watching the show. Shortly after that, it would be his turn to experience the pain himself. Kwon Byungwoo had already told Sean that he would kill everyone involved in this case. You could say that he's a man of his word. Back in the hospital, threats had been removed, and the doctors and nurses made sure that Hyunho was stable. His mom was lovingly peeling an apple at his bedside. She really was a goated mom when it came to caring for her child. With only the 2 of them in the room, Hyunho asked his mom about the cut on her finger. He wondered if she had accidentally sliced herself. She immediately waved it off, not wanting to worry her son. She told him it was just a little nick and nothing too serious, but Hyunho was done with being a shitty son. He knew his mom would always downplay how bad things were. Forcing himself to get up, he wanted to ask around for some bandages. He told her that he should be trying to move around a little anyway. She had to stop him from trying to dash off, promising to get some bandages for her wound. Before exiting the room, she mentioned how stubborn Hyunho was. He must have gotten the trait from his father. Much to the old lady's surprise, the hallway outside the hospital room was unusually dark, devoid of any light at all. She managed to reach the front desk to ask if anyone was in, but there were no responses. Just as she was wondering where everyone went, a man wearing a suit snuck up from behind. Even with a broken arm, the man only needed one strike to render the old lady unconscious and collapsing on the floor. As soon as she hit the ground heavily, the man noted one down on his list of targets. Byung-woo's henchman looked at Sean while he ordered his lackeys to put the old lady in the car first. Mr. Henchman was fascinated by the fact that Sean, the young man who could easily dismantle a powerful organization with tons of security, couldn't do anything without being ordered to do so. Hyunho's hospital room door slid open with an impatient intensity. He thought his mom had come back after taking so long, but what he saw was an injured man riding in with his wheelchair. Kwon Byung-woo looked crazy, as always, as he apologized for taking so long to get in the room. He was excited to finally see what Hyunho looked like. He was looking forward to having a face-to-face with the young man his son almost killed. Unaware of who this guy was, Hyunho felt uneasy and scared. As more men wearing suits poured into the room, Byung-woo casually introduced himself as Joseph's father. He fixated on Hyunho's broken leg, noting how much damage Joseph had inflicted on the poor boy. Byung-woo found all the violence regrettable. He extended his hand to touch the young man's cast as he noted how much it must hurt. This was precisely why he tried teaching his unruly son that efficiency is key to everything. By leaving a witness to the crime half alive and badly hurt, Byung-woo had to step in and do all the dirty work again. Finally realizing that the tree was worse than the fruit, Hyunho froze in his bed, fear taking hold of his mind. A few meters away from the hospital, a woman wearing leather tights all over her body disgruntledly admitted that the office lady from White Tiger Job Center was right. Sister Rachel conceded that she should not have worked with those unprofessional bastards for such a critical mission. In her hand was a zipline gun. Upon firing, the minimal noise barely raised the suspicion of the men inside the hospital room. That did not matter though. She's never been one to prefer a silent and slow operation. Ziplining into the extraction point, the nun smiled as if she was having a blast. Using the momentum from the zipline ride, Rachel kicked the windows open, not stopping until her foot reached one of the third-rate delinquents. At this point, the crazed nun was just yelling about her dear Sean and the disgusting betrayal of Dead Mansion. Kwon Byung-woo wasn't surprised with Rachel's bombastic entrance. He always knew that she would come looking for the golden boy. Watching Sister Rachel cleave through rows upon rows of gangsters was a sight to see. She was supremely skilled in the art of soloing multiple men. With every skillful dodge, she would dish out injuries to the next unsuspecting victim, neutralizing them efficiently. When swinging her blade to rip through a man's flesh, she wouldn't bat an eye. Her smile would only grow bigger. After quickly clearing Byung-woo's gangsters unimpeded, Sister Rachel was finally caught by one of the men's grabs. He repeatedly yelled that he got her, and the boys immediately readied themselves to mount an attack. Rachel became unusually calm as she asked the man if he liked hugging her from behind so much. With her signature disturbed smile, Rachel smashed the back of her head into the grappler's face. That was an easy way to cut herself loose from the lock. Upon freeing herself, the slaughter continued as more and more suited-up gangsters hit the hospital floor cold. Her entire body was a weapon. Receiving a kick from the crazy nun was a death sentence. Realizing that they might have flown too close to the flames, Byung-woo ordered his men to grab Hyunho first and transfer him to the next destination as they continued their plan. Times like this made having a motorized wheelchair very worth it. The psycho drifted and shifted as he zoomed out of the room. They exited to God knows where while Rachel continued taking everyone down one by one. With a hint of impatience in her voice, she asked where the thugs were trying to go. She didn't care about these damned bastards. She just wanted to see Sean again. The only one left to face her now was the henchman with a broken arm. As soon as he snapped his fingers, even more gangsters poured out of different hospital rooms. They looked like battle-hardened thugs who wouldn't take it easy against a lone woman. Sister Rachel looked around, realizing that she had stepped into a troublesome trap. From left to right, men wielding big blades surrounded her. Could she even cleave through all these people to safety? We'll find out. She couldn't fathom the reason why they had amassed so many gangsters to help. They looked like a bunch of roaches pouring into the hallway. There was even one whose weapon choice was the iconic chainsaw. After revving it up, the grisly sound of the motor filled the halls. Rachel raised her hands and admitted that she was impressed with them bringing interesting tools of slaughter. Since they were kind enough to show her something cool, it was only fair that she took out her tools too. By tools, she meant the plethora of guns she had concealed under her coat. Taking submachine guns into either hand, she pointed the Uzis at the unfortunate gangsters. Rachel's trigger-happy finger unleashed a rain of bullets while taunting the thugs to come at her if they could. Even the bravest men would hesitate to rush in once they saw their comrades dying on the floor, bleeding out from bullet wounds. The chainsaw guy was still alive. He hadn't moved an inch from his position since earlier. Rachel effectively controlled the situation by doing what she did best: chaos. Since it looked like she wanted to play with guns, the henchman would play along. He did so by bringing Sean out from where he was being stashed to watch. Hidden behind the other gangsters, the henchman fired a gun from his seemingly broken arm. It hit Sister Rachel on her thigh, causing quite a nasty bleed. She did not look hurt, though. If anything, she looked more pissed instead. The crafty henchman had actually used his fake broken arm to conceal a firearm inside the cast for a chance like this. Finally dropping the broken arm act, he assured Rachel that the next bullet would be aimed at her head. Hearing this threat, something inside Sean switched on. Forcing himself to remove his gag, he asked the henchman if he had just threatened to kill Rachel. Before realizing what was going on, a blur was already heading for Byung-woo's right-hand man. Sean had effectively neutralized the two strong men, keeping him captive in one fell swoop, and finally launched a nasty straight into the right-hand man's face, knocking his glasses away. This wasn't supposed to happen. Sean was supposed to be a useless hostage if no new orders were issued. What they did not take into account was the fact that he currently belonged to Dead Mansion itself. The henchman had just threatened to kill a trainer of Dead Mansion, and it invoked one of the three principles. According to the third principle, Sean could now classify every thug in this hallway as a threat to the organization itself. With nothing but rage in his fists, he swore to break through the current situation and fulfill his